First story. OP grounded his daughter after finding out she is a sidekick to a bully and bullying a trans kid under peer pressure. But she herself is a trans girl. My beautiful daughter, Maggie, turned 16 last month and is trans relevant. Over the summer, we moved halfway across the country. Mixed experience for Maggie. Obviously, it was hard for all the usual reasons, but she was excited to start fresh. For context, she passes very well. She more or less looks young for her age. So in the lead up to September, she told us that she didn't want to be out at her new school. She wanted people to just know her as a girl, not as a trans girl. I admit, my wife and I weren't sure what to make of this, but she seemed happy. She quickly made friends with several other girls her age, especially one girl, Brittany, important soon. Things were going smoothly, and we relaxed a bit. Then Friday I get a text from Maggie's best friend back home, we'll call her Jenna, asking either me or my wife to call her, and not to tell Maggie yet. Basically, Maggie has been hanging out with both Jenna and Brittany online. And Brittany would sometimes say very transphobic things along the lines of trans women not being real women, or they're gross, you get the idea, and Maggie would laugh along and agree. Apparently Jenna privately called her out, and Maggie begged her not to say anything or out her, said Brittany was an amazing friend otherwise, and so on. Jenna, bless her heart, didn't want to be cut off from Maggie, so she agreed. So then last week they were hanging out, and Brittany made a comment about some pervert at school, and Maggie tried to change the subject. But it all came out anyway. There's another trans girl at the school, and Brittany has been bullying her. In front of or with friends, including Maggie. And Maggie has done nothing to help this poor girl or distance herself from Brittany. This led to a massive fight between Jenna and Maggie, and they haven't spoken since. Now Jenna figures that if she can't salvage her friendship with Maggie, she can at least maybe help her by telling us. I exploded. I don't have room for details, but I tore a strip off Maggie for being a part of this, confiscated her phone, grounded her, and told her never to speak to Brittany or that group again. This shot her weekend plans to hell. It's been 2 days, and she hasn't spoken to me since. My wife has been on my team in front of Maggie, and is horrified by what's been going on. But she thinks that we can't expect to forbid teenagers from seeing one another. And I've now cut Maggie off from some of the only friends she has out here. But I just don't get it. I've tried talking to her, but she just won't, and I don't want to push her too hard. Her mother convinced her to bump up her next appointment with her therapist, grudgingly. But otherwise she hasn't had much luck either, and she thinks we made a mistake. So, here I am. I feel badly for the way I reacted, but I also don't see how else I could have. My little girl is enabling a transphobic bully, and I don't see how she can live with herself. Every time I think about it, I just see red. AITA? Update 1 was added as an edit. I sat down with her and apologized for losing my temper. I told her I wasn't mad anymore, just scared for her, and that I wanted to help. I said we would need to solve this, but we'd do it together, and that my wife and I would give her a little time to think about it if she needed it. And then she just about disintegrated. She was sobbing and couldn't even get words out. Her mom and I held her and let her cry it out. After that, I asked if she was ready to talk about it, and she said she wanted a little space first to put herself together. But she said she knows how much of a mess this is and that it needs fixing. So that's where we are now. We're letting her collect herself and calm down, and I'm typing this while her mom puts together a late lunch for her. And after she's eaten, we'll talk and go from there. I'm not sure if I'll be able to update, but I'll try. Thank you again, everyone, for your help and insight. First update. Hi folks. I'm updating here because I think this update will probably end up being too long to add to my original post. And I know I don't meet the update criteria, but I thought I'd fill in those of you who were concerned. So, after Maggie had her cool down and her lunch, her mom and I sat down and washed everything out. Before I go any further, I'm going to do what a few other commenters on the post did and give a shout out to Jenna for what she already did. Yes, but there's more. Maggie evidently put 2 and 2 together, figured out Jenna was the one who told us what was going on, and sent her an irate message on her laptop, which we'd let her keep because of homework. She showed us the message. I'm not going to quote it here, but suffice it to say it was pretty long and ugly, sent the same night I'd gone off on her. Probably would have been a friend to anyone else. Not Jenna, bless her. 3 paragraphs of awful, and Jenna's response was, "Are you okay? Do you need to talk?" Which they did yesterday. I think Mags gave her the silent treatment until then. She didn't say. They got on a call, they talked, and they cried. And they're good now, pending how all this turns out, And I mean, who can blame Jenna for that? But Maggie did say with lots of difficulty that she was feeling trapped in a no-win situation and had been so scared of us finding out about this Brittany thing because she didn't think we'd understand and we'd probably hit the roof. Oops. I think she had it in her head that she could get through to Brittany and work it all out. Fix her, you know. So when we did find out, the whole thing came crashing down. Most of the folks who commented on my post were right on the money. And I'm ashamed I didn't see it, or maybe take the time to think about it before I got so angry the other day. She and Brittany were well into their friendship and Maggie was very much part of the group before any of this came up. And once it did, Maggie was so terrified of what would happen if she were outed that she felt all she could do was play along. But, of course, there's more. It turns out the other trans girl, the victim she needs a name, so I'm calling her Emily, is a new kid, on top of everything else, and from the sound of it, an impressive new kid. She transferred to Maggie's school toward the beginning of December, around the time Jenna started noticing the off-color comments. And apparently, Emily is out and proud, like trans flag buttons on her shirt proud. But there's more. Strap in. I mentioned in one or two comments that I spent some of the weekend getting a hold of Brittany's parents and that they were a collective piece of work. What I found out was that they have been repeatedly complaining to the school about Emily, playing the role of concerned parents, because of all the usual bullshit reasons, pardon my French. Props to the school here, because it sounds like Brittany's folks were politely told to go make sweet love to a tree stump. I might be paraphrasing, and that Emily has as much of a right to her identity as anyone else. So, of course, enter Brittany and anyone who will listen to her. The way Maggie tells it, at first it was just Brittany making the odd comment, here and there about her parents or Emily or whatever. We did pause here and stress how much we wished Maggie could have talked to us then. And she agreed that it might not have gotten this bad. But she, I thought she could fix it. Then we were on winter break. Then COVID shut down the school for a week and classes were online. So it wasn't until just last week that things got particularly ugly. I was relieved to hear that there were only 2 incidents that Maggie witnessed. One was a throwaway comment as Brittany et al. Passed Emily in a hallway. The other, the one that sparked this whole thing, was a day or 2 after that. Started a similar way in passing outside the building. And Emily stopped this time and called Brittany out. They got into it. Words were exchanged. And Maggie just kind of froze. Apparently Emily called the lot of them transphobic Bess. And that hit Maggie pretty hard. She also told us she hadn't really meant to be completely stealthy at first. More so just that she wouldn't bring it up. And if someone asked, she wouldn't lie. But again, comments, chef's kiss, she got caught up in the excitement of being seen as a cis girl. And then all this happened before the subject came up. Christ. This is a lot. Sorry. All that pretty much brings us to this weekend, where things went south. I think the fact that I blew up the way I did kind of put things in perspective for her, like, she knew I'd be mad about all this. But that mad, apparently not. But as I said, she was scared of losing Brittany, scared of being outed, and thought she could fix it. So then we found out about today, and Maggie had to stop and cry again because she was so afraid to show us. I'm guessing I set something off when I talked to Brittany's parents again. Oops, because Brittany's on there, sympathizing with Maggie and talking SHT about Emily, because it's all Emily's fault Maggie can't hang out with them this weekend. And these messages are awful. Maggie's apparently been glued to Jenna all day via her laptop, trying to just deal with all the horribleness. And Maggie says nothing else from before was ever this bad. My wife asked her what she wanted to do now, to which Mags channeled her inner pumpkin spice and told us she can't even with Brittany right now. Which I clarified meant she knows the friendship is over. But she doesn't have any clue how to do it. She doesn't want to come out to her, naturally. But she feels like she's going to get nothing but questions. Since there's no school tomorrow, we're going to sit down with her and brainstorm. I asked her what she would do about Emily, because I still think that because she was a part of this, she has some level of responsibility to help make things right. I was thinking of an apology, which she agreed to. But then Maggie shows me screenshots of all the messages Brittany sent about Emily that morning, along with some of the ones from before the drama, which she'd been furiously finding and saving while she ate her lunch. And she says she wants to take them to the VP at the school. And I'm like, F&A. So, that's where we are now. I'm proud as hell of Maggie. And I'm also scared as hell of what she's going to have to deal with when all the SHT hits the fan. I don't know what the school will or can do with Maggie's screenshots. I guess we'll have to see. Wifey and I are going to sit in on a call to Jenna tonight with Maggie, because we both agreed with what several of you said. She deserves credit for being absolutely top-notch here. And Maggie's therapist had a cancellation tomorrow. Praise Jeebus. So there's that too. I want to thank everyone again for everything. There will be more that happens. This ain't done. But for now, I'm done updating. I'm going to cuddle with my daughter and watch a terrible movie. Update. So I forgot about this account again, and then randomly remembered it today. I have no idea how many people will see this, but in case some of those who saw my last one happen to stumble across it, I figured I might as well let you know how things shook down. Recap. My daughter Maggie, who is trans, was apparently involved in bullying another trans girl at the school. I flipped my SHT, and we found out it was mostly about the other girls in the group, and Maggie didn't know how to deal. I'm going to make it shorter, or at least try. There is not a lot of melodrama. And I have Maggie's permission to share, actually. She was the one who reminded me of it this morning. Kind of a, hey dad, whatever happened to type of thing. The most important news is that things are okay. Not perfect, but okay. There were great points brought up by those who left comments on the last post, and rest assured, they helped us figure things out. I'm doing this in bullet points for my own sake, so bear with me. The Reddit post. Some folks pointed out that there was enough detail in my post, and that it was getting enough attention that it could be tracked down by someone at the school. And after the first comment along those lines, I swore at myself, and then sat Maggie and her mother down about it. Long story short, Maggie told me to leave it up because 1. Taking it down at that stage probably wouldn't make a difference. 2. The overwhelming support was helping her and her mother and I get through it. And 3. She pretty much said, if people find out, they find out. As far as we know, it didn't happen. Not ruling it out, but if someone at the school saw it, it never got back to Maggie. Therapy. Maggie's therapist has been wonderful. When this all hit the fan, we had her on once-a-week appointments for a while. But we've been able to ease back, and Maggie's in a better spot. Maggie is being stealthy. I won't say she decided to come out, as it were, but she realized she'd drifted pretty far from her original outlook when she went to this school, which was, I won't advertise it, but if people find out, it's no big deal. We and her therapist did a lot of unpacking about that, and thank F for her therapist, because I have felt so out of my depth here. But long story short, she's come back around to that since she distanced herself from Brittany and that group. Brittany. There were a few comments pointing out that Maggie didn't owe Brittany anything, and that blocking or deleting would be totally okay in a scenario like this. Good advice. Maggie chose not to do it that way, partly I think because she felt guilty for not speaking up sooner about the awful stuff Brittany said, and partly because she wanted Brittany to know exactly why they couldn't have a friendship anymore. More proof, if any was needed, that she's a lot more courageous than I am. I don't think it needs to be said that Brittany didn't take it well, but Maggie did come away from it with one consolation prize. Another girl in the group who had been similarly or secretly uncomfortable with Brittany. We can call her, I don't know, Eva. I wasn't thrilled about it at first, but when Brittany and the remaining girls in that group were slinging mud after the fact, it meant neither of them had to deal with it solo. Thankfully, it stopped before things got too dramatic. Emily. There was a lot of hopeful fiction in the comments on the last post about Maggie and Emily becoming a tag team trans girl duo and fighting evil. And I'm sorry to disappoint those of you who got your hopes up. But while Emily did accept Maggie's apology, they float in different circles, and Emily quite fairly, I think isn't really looking for a friendship with my daughter. However, about the screenshots. After a bit of thought, Maggie decided to take the advice of several commenters and talk to Emily before going to the VP. Emily, for her own reasons, decided she didn't want that. I didn't even want a copy. Maggie's keeping them safe in case they're needed down the road. Jenna. Still a superhero. She took a little time and space after things settled down, and she was sure Maggie had the support she needed. Maggie had a tough time with that, but her therapist again, an amazing person, helped her understand why Jenna might have needed it. It didn't last long, and now they're back to talking pretty much every day. So that's where things are now. I haven't heard anything about Brittany in a couple of months now, so I'm cautiously optimistic that the whole business is behind us. But time will tell, I guess. To those who accuse this of being a creative writing exercise, that's fine. I'm not bothered about whether the whole internet believes it's real. Otherwise, I just hope other parents of trans kids manage to get something positive out of all this. That's all I've got. Much love from all three of us, and big thanks to everyone for helping us through things. Update. In Ram I the butt face 10 months later. Hi AITB. I'm posting at the request of my daughter, Maggie. Originally, we went to AITA, but apparently we're too frequent flyers for that sub, so it was removed. I got some responses that were very validating, but I honestly wouldn't mind having a broader sample. Context. She recently turned 17, and she is trans. Since this post involves her birth name, we're going to pretend it's George. When she came out, my wife's family was wonderfully supportive, despite knowing next to nothing about gender journeys. My own family was tolerant. Not ideal, but not overly bad. Just trying hard to be comfortable. My sister's aunt, let's call her Bessie, was the biggest hurdle. She and Maggie were very, very close before her transition, probably because Bessie is single without kids. She took the change weirdly personally, and we've been in low contact since. Maggie took this hard. She really missed her Aunt Bess, but over time, she came to accept and mourn the loss. Therapy helped. So this brings us to her birthday. My mother's health isn't what it used to be, and Maggie is her only grandchild, so she wanted to have a family birthday dinner for her with all of us. Grand. We checked with Maggie, no pressure, obviously, and she said yes. The day arrives, and we go to my mom's. My wife couldn't make it due to a work emergency, so it was just me and Mags. We weren't 10 seconds in the door when we heard Bess go, "Is that my Georgie?" from the other room. I almost turned and walked out right then, but Maggie stopped me and told me to let her handle it. I didn't like it, but I said okay. So when Bessie comes around the corner, Maggie gives her a big hug and says, "It's so good to see you, Uncle Brian." My sister had a face like a cat's arse, and I was trying really hard not to laugh. But my dad, bless him, was like, "Well, you walked into that one, Bess." And she walked it back with a half-arsed apology and excuses. Dinner went awkwardly, although I loved every damn second of it. Bess mostly used the right name, but whenever she didn't, Maggie would politely call her Uncle Brian again. In the next few days, I heard from both my mother and Bess in the form of voicemails saying Maggie was rude and took the whole thing too far to intentionally embarrass her aunt. My wife thought it was well-deserved, but she thinks that maybe two wrongs don't make a right, and we should have just left. It came up again yesterday, so Maggie said we should ask here. Were we RC holes at dinner? Edit. Okay, this post omitted some details because of the AITA character limit, and there have been recurring questions, so I'm going to address some here. 1. Maggie's transition began 4 years ago, which is when she stopped going by George. Bessie has had a very long time to practice and adjust. She doesn't want to. 2. We went low contact about half a year after Maggie came out to us. She and Aunt Bess had spent the day together, and Bess all but refused to use the right name or pronouns, and Maggie came home a mess. There would have been no contact for a while, but Maggie didn't want that. And for those who might have looked at my post history, in fairness, the name hasn't always been Maggie. There were a good 2 years of trying on names before she landed on that one. But Bess has never used any name but George or Georgie, and that's the issue. 3. Bessie is, bizarrely, not ideologically transphobic, just very, very attached to the past. Still transphobia, I know, but just for context. She is stubbornly attached to the hope that Maggie will grow out of this phase. I hate that word. It isn't just Maggie. This is a problem in every area of her life. She's a deeply unhappy and lonely person who floats between complaints about the life she has and paralyzing nostalgia for yesteryear. My relationship with her was complicated before Maggie was born, although she absolutely adored Maggie pre-transition and spoiled the heck out of her. I wish she'd spent these 4 years learning to love her niece as much as she loved her nephew. 4. About Mom. Her behavior this round was transphobic, but that is out of character for her. She was the first to figure things out when Maggie first came out to the family, and she whipped my dad into shape on names and pronouns pretty quick for a woman who had no prior exposure. Her actions here are more about my sister than anything else. As I said, Mom's health is failing, and she's terrified that after she and Dad are gone, Bess won't have any family left. She knows Bess was wrong, hell. I think she even knows she herself was wrong. But she's faced with her own mortality, petrified for her daughter, and picking a deeply misguided way to go about things. It's complicated. Update. 15 months later. Hey folks. Maggie and I were waxing nostalgic yesterday, and we remembered this account. And she thought it would be nice to give an update on things. To sum up my last post. At a 17th birthday dinner for Maggie, my trans daughter, my sister Aunt Bess, 49F routinely dead named her, and Maggie responded by politely calling her Uncle Brian whenever she did. There was wailing and gnashing of teeth, but the Reddit consensus was that my daughter's a badass. I know it's been a bit of a goofy long time, and it was a pretty small post, but there's been a lot. Some are good, and some are significantly SHTTY. Maggie put me up to this, so blame her. So let's start with the SHTTY. My mother passed away late last year. We knew it was coming, but shockingly, That knowledge didn't help much. I don't want to get into the details because this update really isn't about that, but it's relevant. I will say that nothing really prepares you to lose a parent, and my wife is a superhero because, without her and Maggie, I probably would have just crawled in a hole and never come back out. On the heels of my mom's passing, Aunt Bess had a mild heart attack. She's doing fine now. Recovery was a B. I had to get more involved than I honestly wanted to, because I wasn't about to let Dad take that all on by himself. And my wife pitched in too again, superhero. And then Maggie is Jesus H. Christ, 18 now and graduating high school. Something else nothing prepares you for. All that context is to make this point. Bessie finally figured out that Maggie is Maggie for good, and she's actually started making an effort. I think the combination of Mom's death, her own scare, and the fact that Maggie will be going off to university in another city next year kind of made it sink in that if she didn't fix things now, she might never get the chance. I don't know. It's not perfect. And frankly, Bessie has gotten even more insufferable in some ways. But back around Maggie's birthday, she sat down with her and gave her an honest-to-God apology. I got it secondhand from Maggie because I wasn't there. But my favorite part of the whole thing is a direct quote from Bess that Maggie gave me word for word. You know, I wanted a niece more than a nephew anyway when you were little. So maybe this trans thing was all my fault from the start. So yeah, the world still revolves around Bessie in her head. But she hasn't used Maggie's dead name once around us since then and only slipped on pronouns a few times. So I'm starting to believe this is a good thing. And of course Maggie's overjoyed to have her Aunt Bess back, especially after losing her grandma. So things are sad, but nice. It's weird. Anyway, that's pretty much it. Maggie says I should tell you that you people are cool, so there you go. Seal of approval. Second story. A girl I didn't know was grieving at my boyfriend's tombstone after everyone left, so I confronted her, believing he had cheated on me with her, only to regret everything. Now, I have to live with this guilt for the rest of my life. My boyfriend of 3 years passed away. We had a wonderful relationship, but now there is a possibility that he was cheating on me. So I was with my boyfriend for 3 years. We had a beautiful and perfect relationship. He was a wonderful man in every way, and just a month ago, he died tragically and unexpectedly. Both his family and I have been devastated and inconsolable by this. We were going to move in together, and he was taken from me. About 2 weeks ago, her mother approached me with a box that she found while cleaning his room. He would occasionally visit her, and he used to stay overnight, so his room was kept intact, like when he lived permanently there. She had decided to tidy up and clean his room because she was in a better state, and she found a box with the initials of my name. She didn't open it, but she could see superficially that they were things like letters and some dried roses, among other things, that she decided not to look at further because she thought they were my things or about us. So she thought it would be best to give it to me so I could review those things alone. I thanked her, but I didn't feel ready to see all these things, so I put the box away. A couple of days ago, I went to visit his grave. As I got closer, I could see a woman there. I immediately stopped to see if I could recognize her, but it was not a family member or friend. She had brought flowers, and I could see that she was crying. I was afraid to approach since I didn't know who she was, and I simply waited at a safe distance. She left after a few minutes and didn't even turn to look at me. Well, it seemed obvious to me that I didn't know her. That whole night, I couldn't sleep thinking about this woman. Who is she? Where did she know him from? I knew all his family, friends, and people from his work, and I didn't recognize her from anywhere. I couldn't be calm or sleep those days because I thought of many possibilities, and he was no longer there, so I could ask him. I decided to go to his friends and tell them what happened. As soon as I described the woman, they looked at each other nervously and seemed to know who it was, but they didn't say anything. I insisted and cried a lot. I told them that I deserved to know if I had the wrong image of my boyfriend. Finally, they told me that it was his ex, and one of them confessed to having informed her about his death and his resting place because he believed that he would have liked it, and she went to see him. I felt like my heart fell to my feet. I asked everything I could. It turns out that they had studied together since elementary school, and my boyfriend had been in love with her since then. In high school, they started a relationship that lasted approximately 4 years, and then they were on and off until just 2 years before we started a relationship. He told me that according to what they knew, they had cut off all contact 5 years ago, but they didn't know for sure if this was true. I asked him for her name, and her name begins with the same initial as mine, so now I don't know what to think. I don't know if I should contact her to ask if she was with my boyfriend at the same time as me. I know that the first thing I should do is check that damn box, and see if there are any of my things or things about her. But I can't. I'm so afraid of destroying this image I had of my boyfriend as the man I thought he was. I don't know what to do. I was already devastated to lose him. But now I could also lose all the beautiful memories I have of him if I finally found out that he was cheating on me. His friends tell me to leave the issue alone because he is no longer here to defend himself. Comments. Dear Dorothy, this seems above Reddit's pay grade, honestly. Have you thought of finding a therapist who has a lot of experience with grief? It sounds like you haven't gone into the box, so you don't even know if they were in contact. It's common to still grieve for your ex, even if you have no contact. It's also common to retain mementos from past relationships, especially young ones. My high school partner died a couple years ago, and even though I've been out of contact for years, I still went through some grieving. Did he give you anything to be suspicious of when he was alive? Dexter, the serial killer. My first serious boyfriend, who was an ex for about 2 years, died suddenly. I was in another relationship at the time and hadn't really kept in touch with the ex. We had a friend of friends. But I absolutely went to the funeral and couldn't imagine missing it. I honored the place in my heart that he had, along with our past together. I don't ever think we would have been happy together in the long term. But I absolutely still, almost 2 decades later, feel a gut punch of sadness when I think about such a young, promising life lost. So from my perspective, his ex visiting his grave is hardly a testament to her continued contact with or even feelings for him. OP. Well, there was an incident when I found him an Instagram account that I didn't know about. But he told me it was one he had created to upload photographs of his work, so I didn't question it anymore. Other than that, as I mentioned, he was a wonderful man. But recent events are making my mind imagine many scenarios I can't control. Update. 2 months later. Hi, it's been a little while since I was here, totally paranoid about something absurd. To be honest, when I made the post, I expected a different reaction, like people saying, "Open the box, go, and confront the ex-girlfriend." I was looking for support because I knew it was crazy. I'm very happy to have found such kind people who cared about me without knowing me. After posting, I really knew I wasn't okay, and I had to take care of my mental health. The first thing I did was call my mom and tell her I needed help because I was going downhill. She came in less than an hour. That whole night, I cried in her arms. Afterwards, she helped me find a psychologist, and we also found a thanatologist. We were able to schedule an appointment a few days later. So far, I've had a few sessions. I won't lie and say I'm fine now because I still feel like life sucks for taking it away from me. And sometimes I feel like I'm floating, disconnected from the world, or I forget that he is no longer here, and my first instinct is to look for him or call him if something happens to me. It is being difficult, but at least I already asked for help, and I am receiving it. So I'm in a better place now, but there's still a long way to go, and I know I have to do it without him. Regarding the box, I thought about returning it to his mom, but I really thought it was most likely about his ex. It was, and I didn't want his mom to feel bad for giving me something that wasn't mine. I decided to give it to his friend, and for him to get her into the right hands. He has truly been a rock for me. Even though he is also grieving because he lost his best friend, they were friends since high school and studied the same in college. The general reason for this update is that a few days ago, I spoke with her. I know that everyone was against contacting her, but it was not intentional, and the truth is, beyond hurting myself, I felt much better afterwards. I ended up seeing her again in the cemetery. When I approached her at first, she just looked at me confused. When I told her who I was, she just saw me the way everyone sees me lately, with pity. We were silent for what seemed like an eternity, and then she started telling me something funny about him when he was a kid. She told me a lot of things that I didn't know about him. I must say she was very kind and sweet, and she is so much like him in personality, and maybe it's because they grew up together, or because I feel so desperate to find him somewhere. But I really felt that they had the same way of speaking and the same sense of humor, even though she was very afraid to talk about their time as a couple. It ended me telling me a little about them. She told me that for some reason or another, they were never able to fit together as a couple, even though they loved each other, so they decided to walk away before getting hurt. It turns out that the last time they spoke was 2 years ago, when he wrote to congratulate her on her wedding. They didn't talk much beyond wishing each other the best. She told me that she was glad that he had found a person like me, and that he had been happy. She also thanked me for the box. She said that it contained very valuable things for her. That was all. There was no infidelity, and she only confirmed that he was a wonderful person, and I was very lucky to have met him. The only thing that made me sad was that even though he was always the best with me, I came to doubt his integrity as a person. Now I just have to continue with the therapy and try hard to learn to live without him. Thank you all. Comments. WCHFM. I had to Google this, but for others. A thanatologist is someone who studies death and dying from multiple perspectives: medical, physical, psychological, spiritual, ethical, and more. Professionals in a wide range of disciplines use thanatology to inform their work, from doctors and coroners to hospice workers and grief counselors. Marble free. I am glad you got closure. I'm a widow, and it can be so difficult. It's the stupid stuff, like a show recording that he watched or a new song coming out from a band he liked. Sending hugs. Thank you for watching the video. If you are interested in listening to these kinds of stories, we've got more in store for you. Simply subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share it with your friends.